Hey there, today we are talking about 10 lessons that I have learned after 10 years on our homestead. We recently celebrated the anniversary of having been on our farm for 10 years, and so I started to think, what are 10 lessons that I have learned after 10 years on our farm? So here we go, 10 lessons I've learned after 10 years on the farm.
Are we ready to go outside? Yeah? Okay.
One lesson that we have learned after 10 years on the homestead is the animals that you're super excited to get once you get to the homestead might not necessarily be the animals that you keep once you get to the homestead. When my husband and I first moved here 10 years ago, he wanted horses, I wanted goats. That was the thing that we were super excited about. We had them for a few years and we don't have horses or goats anymore. Similarly, the animals that you thought you might just try and you weren't like super excited to get them, but you thought, okay, we'll try them and see what happens, might be the animals that you fall in love with, like pigs or ducks. The second thing that I would say that I learned after being on a farm for 10 years is that moving to the farm is a family thing, but it's not necessarily going to be everybody's identity. Just because you all live on a farm doesn't mean that all of you think of the farm and farm life as your be-all, end-all. I don't know that my boys consider themselves to be farm boys. I don't know that my husband considers himself to be a farmer, but I consider myself to be a farm girl. Like, the farm is my thing. I've heard my husband tell people, the farm is Amy's thing and I'm just kind of there to help when she needs help. I claim the farm girl life as my identity, but just because you move to a farm doesn't mean everybody in your family is going to feel that way. And I think that's important to point out, because I know there's a lot of people who move to a farm and it's like their family thing. Their kids are going to be so excited to pick eggs and do all that stuff. And then their kids grow up and they want to move to suburbia. Like, the farm life is not for everybody, and just because you all move there doesn't mean you're all going to necessarily identify with that as your complete being. Another thing I would say that I have learned after 10 years on the farm is that you're not going to talk about everything that happens on the farm. First of all, there are farm topics that cause drama. I am amazed how much drama chickens can start, not actual chickens, but talking about chickens and the way you raise them. Y'all, it's insane. Talking about barn cats, talking about vetting animals, talking about alternative medicines that you may use on the farm. It's all crazy. Who knew homesteading could be so dramatic? So there are things that I choose not to talk about publicly that if you message me or email me or talk to me in person, I'll talk about them, but not on YouTube. The other thing that I have realized is that not everybody can handle hearing about what happens on a farm. There's some crazy stuff that happens on a farm. If you live on a farm, if you live on a homestead, you understand that. If you don't, you might not. And it takes you a while to figure out who are the people who really want to hear about what happens on your farm, and who are the people who can actually handle hearing about what happens on your farm, and who are the people you might just want to talk about something else with. The next lesson I would say is something that you learn when you move to the homestead, now that we've been here 10 years, is that death becomes normal, especially if you are going to be on a homestead with animals, whether you're raising them for meat or you've just got them for pets or whatever. If you've got animals on your homestead, death becomes normal to you. That doesn't mean it doesn't bother you. It means it becomes normal to you. And that's something I've always had a really hard time explaining. But what I found is that it's hard to explain to people that don't live on a homestead, but you don't have to explain it to people who do. The fifth thing that I learned after 10 years of being on the farm is, Amy, you are not Ma Ingalls and it is not 1890 whatever. When we first moved to the farm, I was all about, we were going to do everything the old-fashioned way. I was like harnessing my inner Ma Ingalls, and people used to call me Wanamish because I was like, I wanted to wanna be Amish, you know what I'm saying? So I was the Wanamish girl, and we were just going to do all the things when we moved to the farm. I wasn't on Facebook, like I was just like totally in my own little world, out here in the middle of nowhere doing my thing. But here's the thing, modern homesteading means kind of having one foot in some old-fashioned stuff and one foot in modern times. And you have to get okay with living that way. It can feel like a total glitch in your brain, but you learn to be okay with that. And it's a really good thing, because if I wouldn't have learned to embrace technology and all of this great, wonderful stuff, I wouldn't have a podcast or a website or a YouTube channel. So hey, technology. The sixth thing that I have learned after 10 years of being on our farm is that there are literally a million ways to do things. The way that you do things on your homestead is going to have to do with where you live, how much land you have, how much help you have. If you work full-time off the farm, there are so many things that are going to go into what you are able to do on your homestead. That is why when I am giving advice about homesteading, when someone asks me a question, I make sure to say, this is how we do it on our farm, or this is what has worked for us, or this is what hasn't worked for us, because what I am doing here might not work where you are. There's a million ways to do it. Another thing that we've learned after 10 years on the homestead is that every year is different. Y'all, some years you got so much corn coming out of your ears you don't know what to do with it, and other years you can't grow an ear of corn to save your life. We've had years where I can't even keep up with a tomato harvest, and other years where I'm like, come on, tomato plant, are you gonna do something? I can't remember the last time we had a decent cucumber harvest. Y'all, every year is different. So don't get too cocky that you know what you're doing, because the next year, you're gonna learn some lessons. Another lesson we've learned after 10 years here at our homestead, you're always busy. It's a never-ending project. There's always something to do. When we moved to our homestead, the house was actually unfinished. There was no flooring. There was a wall we had to take out. There's a bunch of stuff we had to do before we could even move into the house. So it started as a huge project. There was a lot of repairs that needed to be done on the barn, lots of stuff that needed to happen. There is never a lack of things to do on a homestead, as you can see by all this wood that's sitting behind me. And the crazy thing about being on a homestead is you can think you've got everything set and everything is working great, and then you read someone's blog or you watch a YouTube video and you're like, oh, look what they're doing on their homestead. We should do the same thing. And then you're back to another project. And the ninth thing that I have learned after being on a homestead for 10 years, this is more for content creators, but it is really, really hard to write about or photograph or video all the things that you're doing on your farm. When we moved to the farm, I was like, I'm gonna be able to teach people to do so much stuff. But the reality is, number one, I forget to bring my video camera places or my phone, you know, to take it out of my pocket and take pictures. Or I forget it's something you guys might actually want to know about, because here's the thing, when you're on a farm, when you're on a homestead, this life that you're living, it's just your normal, and you think everybody knows what you're doing and knows how to do what you're doing, so it doesn't occur to you, hey, maybe I should make a video on how to make a really good venison steak, or maybe I should do some how-tos about how to butcher a duck or stuff like that. This stuff doesn't occur to me, you guys. I should probably start thinking like a content creator. It's only been 10 years on the farm, Amy. Figure it out. The other thing, and this is something I'm going to try and remedy in the coming year, is that there's a lot of stuff I do on the farm that I can't video myself because my hands is busy. Butcher day's a lot of work, y'all. So I'm hoping that this year I'm gonna be able to either invite people to my farm to take care of the videoing and taking pictures and all of that, so you guys can be learning the stuff that I'm doing while I'm actually doing it. Deal? The 10th thing that I have learned since being on the farm for 10 years is you're gonna screw things up. You will screw up bad. You may be the reason that one of your animals dies. You may be the reason your barn almost burns down. There's a lot of different things that you might screw up, will screw up while you are homesteading. But here's the thing, you can't let that keep you from homesteading. You can't let that keep you from doing the things you want to do. You have to be brave enough to suck. You have to be brave enough to be willing to screw things up in order to figure it out to do things better. So homesteading is not for the faint of heart. Accept the fact that you're gonna screw some things up, and some of those things might be real big, but it's part of the process. It's part of living on a homestead. The 11th thing that I have learned after being on a farm for 10 years is that homesteading costs money. I know there's always going to be this argument that does homesteading save money or cost money. In my experience, what homesteading does is shifts the money you're spending on some stuff to other places. I will say that I would not be able to afford the quality of food that I am eating if I wasn't raising it myself. I have freezers and shelves full of the most amazing home-raised food, y'all. If there's people out there that are gonna tell you that homesteading saves you all this money and it's really not that expensive to do, I have heard people say this. Y'all, run the other way. And the 12th and final thing that I'm gonna share with you that I have learned after 10 years on a homestead is that it is more everything than what you thought it's going to be. It's more expensive, it's more difficult, it's more awesome, it's more peaceful, it's more life affirming, it's more everything than what you think it's going to be. And I know that I would not change it for anything. I don't remember what number I'm on. One of the first lessons we learned when we moved to the farm, oh my gosh, my mouth doesn't work because it's too cold out here.